Okay, now that the System of a Down review is done, what should I review next? Sure, why the hell not? What is up, everyone? It is Reviews Kingdom, and today I am back at it again with another review. And this one, I'm going to be doing a movie review. Yeah, remember when I used to do those? Those were some pretty good times, right? Yeah. But this one is not just going to be any other movie review, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, because in this one, it's going to be a very interesting one, as in this one, we're going to be taking a look at the 2003 Ang Lee Hulk movie. Now, for those of you who've been watching my channel for the past 6 to 7 years, you may have noticed that I've already made a video on this movie back in 2018, about 6 years ago. And well, you may also notice two things about that video. One, it's privated, and two, it was a hot steaming pile of shit, hence why it's privated. So for this video, I wanted to go all the way and start from scratch and talk about this movie, as recently, this movie actually turned 20 years old not that long ago. And once again, just like the Linkin Park review, I am skating on the thin line of technicality because this movie came out June 20th of 2003. So once again, I am still celebrating its 20th anniversary. That's another W in my book. But regardless of all that, regardless of the chit chat, let's talk about the Ang Lee Hulk movie, as this movie has a very interesting legacy, and I want to see if it holds up or if it's just as bad as everyone said it is, because I remember I used to like this movie quite a bit. But does it stand the test of time? Well, let's find out. This is my review of Ang Lee's Hulk. Now, before I go into this review, I feel like it's necessary to address the history of this movie and how it's been received upon the years. All the way back in 2003, people were excited to see the Hulk in his big screen debut. Keep in mind, this movie came out a year after the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, and during the Spider-Man movie's theatrical run, there was a Hulk teaser trailer that got audiences hyped. So when it came time for the film to release, people were lining up to see the Hulk, and the first impressions were not too good. Audiences and moviegoers were confused as to how to feel about the movie and what they just saw, leaving them mixed on the movie. The most common complaints for the movie is that it's too slow and it has too much talking instead of Hulk smashing and crashing his way to the city. Now, there were critics going on to say that they appreciated the movie, such as Roger Ebert, praising it for its ambitious and unique nature, but the common consensus is that it was a lackluster blockbuster with very middling reviews. And to add upon all this, the movie didn't do exactly too well financially. The first weekend opened up with an impressive $62 million, but the second weekend in its box office run dropped hard after the word of mouth got around about how mixed the film really was, dropping about 70% in the film's second weekend. The only saving grace for this film's financial troubles was the immense success of the Hulk cans. Truly spectacular, I know. It also goes without saying how dangerous those things actually really were. Seriously, the Hulk cans can do some serious damage. But in case you haven't noticed, that was 20 years ago, and well, that was quite some time ago. So how does it hold up now? Well, that's why I'm here. I'm going to see if this movie is better than remembered, or if it's an odd piece of the 2000s we should all just forget. As for the history for this movie with me, I really enjoyed this movie when I first watched it 7 years ago. I actually preferred this Hulk movie over The Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton. There was just something about this movie that kept me coming back for more, and I couldn't exactly put my finger on what it was. I did try to explain back in 2018 with the review, but trust me people, that wasn't exactly my finest piece of work. But now I feel like I can properly articulate my thoughts and explain how I feel about the movie. So, without further ado, let's get into the review. Oh yeah, I also feel like I should mention that I will be spoiling the story of this movie, and well, I do feel a bit silly for saying that considering that this movie is 20 years old, but I'm doing it just in case. So in case you haven't seen the Hulk movie and you want to see it and you don't want to get spoiled, go watch the Hulk movie and then come back to my review. With that being said, let's start the review. But what is the story even about? The story starts with scientist David Banner working on some experiments to see if he can strengthen the immune system with super soldier blood to increase the strength of the human body. This experiment is very risky and dangerous, and it's to cause a concern for General Ross, who doesn't want Banner to go through with it. Of course, David doesn't listen, and he goes through with this plan anyways, and he not only tests it on himself, but he also passes it on to his own newborn son. However, General Ross finds out that David's been experimenting on himself, and this makes him very unhappy, to where he fires David off the military base. And like any other sane individual, David decides that he's gonna blow up the entire military base and try to kill his own newborn son. Years later, Bruce is all grown up, but it's very evident that there's something off about him, like there's something bubbling up on the surface that wants to break out. And as in the comic book lore, Bruce accidentally gets struck with a heavy dose of gamma radiation. Combine this with the trauma of watching his dad kill his mom, and you get the Hulk, a beast who is consumed with rage and repressed memories, who will destroy everything in his path. I think that the story is definitely one of the strongest parts about this movie. Instead of having a loose narrative with set pieces for the Hulk to smash, it goes more into the psychology of Bruce Banner and why he got his alter ego. It's easy to see Bruce Banner as a wooden character compared to his brutish counterpart, but director Ang Lee thought that there was more to Bruce than what meets the eye. Ang Lee really fleshes out this character by adding some depth to Bruce by exploring what can create such a monster such as the Hulk, and how traumatic events can either make or break your life. This Bruce isn't a happy-go-lucky scientist. This Bruce is one who always feels stuck and unsure about the world around him, stuck with the heavy burden of watching his mother get killed by his own father. The Hulk is him finally releasing all the frustration and anger he has and destroying everything in his path. That's something I really appreciated about this movie a lot, and I'm really glad that Ang Lee took this approach to this character. Another character who has done really well in my opinion is Betty Ross. At a surface glance, one can make the conclusion that Betty Ross is the love interest of the movie and there's nothing else to it. But that's not the case. Betty Ross plays just as much of an important role as Bruce does. While her and Bruce did have a romantic interest at one point, you can always tell that Betty is trying everything in her power to get him out of his shell and to get to why he's always so afraid all the time. She's genuinely concerned for him and wants to help Bruce become a better person and overcome his fear and trauma, but ultimately in the end, Bruce is too unstable for her to try and fix. It may not seem like much based off that description alone, but in execution it works way better than it does on paper. One of the more underappreciated elements of this movie is just how downright psychotic David Banner is and how great of an absorbing man he is. Throughout the movie, we can see that he is all too consumed with his experiments and is willing to go through the extremes in order to get the results he wants, even if that means he has to kill his own son through the process by absorbing all of his energy when the Hulk comes into play. All he craves is power and strength, thus becoming the absorbing man. He doesn't function as a traditional bad guy, as he is more of an antagonist than he is a supervillain, which is fitting for the tone of this movie. Also, for as psychotic as he is, there is a level of sympathy for him, because at one point he did have a normal life. It's just through the circumstances of him trying to play God that led him to becoming the person who he truly is. When Bruce finally transforms into the Hulk for the first time and David sees the Hulk for the first time, he sees Bruce more as an experiment and he sees the Hulk for all his power and his energy, and he wants to absorb all the power and energy from Bruce. And when Bruce finally caves in and gives him all his power, it's too much for David to handle, resulting in him literally exploding into a cloud of nothingness. I really think that this is the perfect kind of villain for this movie, as David himself has drained all the life out of Bruce and has sucked every single last bit of his life out of him. Now, how is the Hulk himself? If I'm being completely honest, I would have to say that this is one of, if not the best, on-screen adaptations of the Hulk that we've ever gotten. I think the reason as for why I think this way is the way he's portrayed in the movie. The Hulk is known as a superhero, a very angry and destructive one, but still a good hero nonetheless. In this movie, he isn't exactly portrayed as a hero who can fit in with the likes of the Avengers in heroism. He's more akin to Frankenstein or any of the old Universal monster movies. He's angry, sure, but only because the people around him are always hunting him down and trying to hurt him. In reality, the Hulk just wants to be at peace and have time to just calm down. He's more of a tragic character who is brought into a world full of people who are obsessed with power and greed. That's what makes this Hulk a truly special rendition, because he isn't just some brutish beast who craves destruction. Now, don't take this as the film being too pretentious or artsy, because it's really not that deep. This is the same movie where a giant green man has to fight a bunch of giant mutant dogs in order to save Betty. To me, it's a perfect mid-ground of dramatic writing and fun action pieces. Now at this point, you're expecting me to talk about the CGI of the Hulk and how terrible it looks. And this is something I feel gets run into the ground completely. I'm not going to tell you how the CGI hasn't held up 20 years later because, like, well, no shit. Technology has come a long way since. I think. So yeah, chances are it may or may not look great 20 years later, but if I'm going to be completely honest with you, outside of some shots that look off, I'm looking at this one in particular, I'd say that the CGI has held up pretty decently, I'd say. The Hulk looks fine, he looks better at night than he does in daylight, but for the most part, the team at ILM tried their best, and I think the Hulk looks just fine. Yeah, he can look jerky and unnatural at times, but I still think he looks good for the most part, but that's just me. And while this is all cool and all, you may be wondering, how does the action hold up in this movie? After all, this movie is focused around a character whose main character trait is smashing and crashing his way through things and causing havoc everywhere he goes. And well, I'm happy to report that the action in this movie is golden. Even people who dislike this movie will tell you that the action is great in this movie. Now, this all makes sense considering that the director Ang Lee directed Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, so you know the action is going to be top notch. The choreography and cinematography in the more intense scenes is thrilling as exactly as it should be. Like, you cannot tell me that you didn't enjoy watching the Hulk pick up a tank and throw it across the desert. That is just pure bliss right there. Or how about the time he grabs a missile, biting off the explosive tip and spinning it back at the helicopter it came from.
Holy shit, he got my missile!
Hell, even the fight with the dogs has some great shots and set pieces too. It's all really well shot and there's little to no jump cuts, making every action scene cohesive and easy to follow. For the most part. Now I've gone all this time in the review without actually talking about the acting in this movie, and well, how does that stack up here? Well, I'm happy to report that the acting and the overall casting is really good in this movie. Every actor in this movie plays their role super well, especially Eric Bana. Eric Bana does a great Bruce Banner in my opinion. I know a lot of people have differing opinions on him, with some saying he is a bit wooden, but I'd say that's not the case for me. Sure, at times he can come off as a bit bleak, but for the most part he does well portraying a character who is deeply fractured and tormented by his own repressed memories and trauma. He can go from calm and reserved to absolutely fucking nuts seething with anger. He really does a great job at showing that even when he's not transformed into the Hulk, he still very much contains all the bottled up rage that such a repressed man would have. He's still just as capable of hurting someone even when not in the Hulk form, and Eric Bana portrays this extremely well. He is honestly my favorite of all the on-screen Bruce's. He has just so much range in this movie. Jennifer Connelly was really great as well, giving a very compelling performance of trying to help out Bruce as much as she possibly can. She knows that there's something bubbling up underneath with Bruce the entire time, and throughout the movie we see her try and fix Bruce as much as she possibly can. It would have been easy to cast her as the damsel in distress, but Ang Lee took a different approach as she has much more impact in the story than you might think. Jennifer Connelly sells every single bit of her character, from her compassionate and worrying nature of Bruce. And as for Sam Elliott, what's there to say that hasn't already been said already? The man absolutely nails it as Thunderbolt Ross. This man is an absolute legend. He's a very imposing and threatening individual who gets the job done. And, much like the rest of the cast, he is very stone cold serious. He's not afraid to lock up Bruce after hearing about his experiments that are similar to Bruce's father's, and he is certainly not hesitant to destroy the Hulk once that whole can of worms is open. He will stop at nothing to get the job done, and that's what I love about him. He perfectly portrays the stone cold military general bent on destroying the Hulk. However, there is a side to him that does feel sorry for Bruce, as he was a victim of abuse and science gone wrong. You can tell by the end of the movie, he really didn't want to destroy Bruce, leaving him to be remorseful. It's really great stuff here, and Sam Elliott pulls this off very well. And now for the controversial opinion here. We are now going to be talking about Nick Nolte. I hear a lot of people saying how Nick Nolte is probably the zaniest of all the actors in the movie, as he really is all over the place, but I think that's not without purpose. In the beginning of the movie, we see that even though he's still going against the military, he still really cares for his family. We see a glimpse of him and Bruce on Christmas morning, playing along together, but once the military shuts him down and he blows up the military base, that's when his biggest downfall comes, as he tries to murder Bruce and accidentally kills his wife Edith in the process. Naturally, he's locked up for a long time, and this naturally makes him a broken and fractured man, one who's lost everything in life and all semblance of redemption, and Nick Nolte portrays this very well. Once he sees the Hulk for the first time, he gains a god complex and completely goes off the rails, trying to suck every single bit of power he possibly can. So yeah, every time he goes above and beyond in this movie is completely intentional. The man is a lunatic narcissist, and Nick Nolte does well in his role, and I have no shame in saying that, even with this goofy ass moment. Now, I've praised this movie to no end so far, but I do have some rather tragic news. This movie might have a couple of problems. So, let's get into them, shall we? The first glaring problem is the film's odd pacing. This is also a complaint most viewers have, but if you let me cook, I'll elaborate. My problem isn't the more dramatic scenes or the odd visual trips this movie has, it's more or less the consistency. It goes from slow to quick and back to slow and quick again. I understand that I sounded like a total dipshit explaining that, but if you watch the movie, you'll catch the problem that I did. It could be breakneck and yet so slow at the same time. I don't think it ruins the movie, but I think it's something that could have been improved on to make the film a little bit better. It could be all over the place at times, but still leaving room for an entertaining and unique experience. Another issue I have with the film is some of the lighting choices. I'm just excluding the first Hulk out because I still think it works well even with dark lighting, but I'm more so talking about the Hulk dog scene and the final lake battle. It's very well shot, sure, but you really can't tell what the hell is going on from time to time, and it can be a bit frustrating to keep up with. It's not terrible, but it'll leave you a bit annoyed at how dark it can get. And now we have to talk about the most infamous critique of the movie, the comic book editing. For me, it's a double-edged sword, as at times it can work really well with some really well and clever transitions, but some can really affect the tone of the movie. Ang Lee wanted to use the comic book editing to help sell the comic book feel, and that's certainly an interesting idea, but it's an idea that can have its pros and many cons. Like I said before, some work and some don't. Thankfully though, most of the dramatic scenes spare themselves from using these comic book panels to add more weight to the scenes. But when they do come up, it's always a gamble if it'll be clever like the helicopter transportation scene or the infamous Talbot's death scene. Now, many people who watched this movie all came to the same conclusion that it was a very strange movie due to several contributing factors. For once, we have the comic book style editing, we have the dogfight scene, and we have the overall dreamlike quality to the movie. And look, as much as I'm going through the ends of the earth to defend this movie tooth and nail, I won't lie to you, this is a pretty strange film. Like, especially for a 2003 summer blockbuster. I mean, this has to be one of the most unconventional summer blockbusters to ever release for its time. But there's often one element that's often overlooked about this film, and it's something that you might not expect. And that is the film's constant obsession with nut shots. I wish I was making that shit up, but no, it's real. So to wrap up this video, what are my final thoughts on the Ang Lee Hulk movie? And well, I gotta say, this film is a lot better than what it's given credit for. Now, don't get me wrong, people, this is not a flawless masterpiece. This film has some flaws, it has some misses. But it also takes some very big swings, and those swings pay off for the most part. The acting is pretty solid, the writing is pretty solid, and the action is as exciting as you expect it to be from a Hulk movie like this. And director Ang Lee definitely had an ambitious take on this character. It was a very weird movie for its time, and to this day, it still is a very strange movie. But director Ang Lee had a very strong vision of what he wanted, and the dramatic elements of this movie work super well. And of course, it's not all doom and gloom, it's not all serious, as we have the Hulk action pieces to kind of counteract and have a fun side to the movie to counteract some of the more dramatic and psychological elements of this movie. It all works out incredibly well. You think it would be an absolute clusterfuck because of the clashing tones, but it actually works off so well. Now, like I said, this film is not flawless by any means. I think the comic book editing is unique and it can work in some certain cases, but yeah, it does kind of take away from this film's tone a little bit. Like, I tried to defend it, but there's just so many moments in this movie where the comic book editing just kind of like takes away from the tone. But it's not really to where I can't take it seriously, because this film is still really good in its own right. I wouldn't call it a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but underrated, I would say so. And as for my final rating of this movie, I would have to give this one a strong 7 out of 10. If you haven't seen this movie before, or if you have seen this movie before and you didn't like it before, I highly recommend you go checking it back. Because who knows, maybe you might find something more about this movie to appreciate about. Or you might still have the same opinion. It's all up to you, really. I can't be the judge of that. But regardless of that, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in another video. Bye.